Hey there, pirates. Welcome aboard the Anime No Me channel. Just imagine if at that moment when Garp showed up, all determined to leave little Luffy with Dadan, he had changed his mind. Or better yet, what if instead Dragon himself had put his foot down and said, "No, this boy is my son." And if the world is going to tremble at his name one day, then he better start learning early what that means. Because maybe he already knew. Maybe ever since he saw that wide smile on the baby's face, he thought, this brat isn't ordinary. He's going to shake everything up. So let's pretend that's what happened. I hope for your support to help our crew win, and to do so, you just need to click the thumbs up button, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel. By doing this, you will win an incredible devil fruit. So just comment which fruit you want. Luffy didn't grow up in the middle of Goa's forest, running around with Ace and Sabo, getting scolded by Dadan, and eating half-raw meat stolen from bandits. Number in this universe, he grew up surrounded by maps, strategies, and secret meetings. He grew up inside a hidden revolutionary army fortress. And you know what? He hated every second of it. Over time, the revolutionaries began to realize that boy wasn't normal. He was chaotic, yes, but there was something else. Luffy might break a few important things just because he thought it was funny. He might call Kuma Robo Bear and try to climb on him like a toy. He probably had nicknames for everyone, from Ivankov to Sabo, because yes, Sabo was also rescued early in this world and became like a brother again, only earlier. The two of them together, worse than two missiles of ideas. But Dragon didn't let things slide. He taught everything he could. More than that, he let the boy see people's pain, see how the world government manipulated the newspapers, see the slaves of Mary Joas. He might have even taken Luffy on a small mission just so he could understand. The problem is, Luffy isn't someone who understands pain through logic. He understands it through feeling. So every time he saw an injustice, he wanted to punch someone, not plan, not build a spy network. He wanted to fix it with a fist, and that frustrated Dragon. At 7 years old, Luffy was already saying he was going to be the Pirate King, and Dragon got mad, said it was childish, said pirates don't change the world, that pirates are just pawns in the game. But Luffy just laughed and said, I don't care, I will be. And maybe at that moment, Dragon remembered someone, Roger, because maybe he'd seen Roger up close once, and now that same light was there. But now, it was in his own son, and he couldn't extinguish it, even if he wanted to. At 10, Luffy runs away again, but this time, he goes far. He ends up on an island full of Marines, alone, with a small pot of meat tied to his back and the straw hat Dragon had given him, saying it once belonged to a man who laughed until the end. He just wanted adventure, and in that adventure, he ends up captured. But not for long, because the one who comes to rescue him is Sabo. In this universe, the two of them grow up as revolutionary brothers, but with one detail. Luffy never forgot he wanted to be a pirate. And Sabo, well, Sabo is Sabo. He says he wants to help the world, but he helps Luffy too. And because of that, they get into missions no one approved. One time, they ended up on a Tenryubito ship just to free the slaves. Luffy nearly got badly beaten. But when they grabbed him, for the first time, Haki slipped out, a shine in his eyes, a pressure in the air, and the guards passed out. All of them. Dragon saw it and said nothing, just looked. Because maybe he already knew his son carried something even he couldn't understand. Something beyond any revolution. When Luffy turned 14, the world already knew his name. Not as a pirate, but as a kid terrorist. Someone who showed up out of nowhere, messed everything up, and disappeared laughing. But Luffy wanted more. He wanted a ship. He wanted to set sail. He wanted the open sea. And then one day he told his father, you want to change the world your way, but I'll change it my way. And he left with Ivankov's blessing, Sabo's pat on the back, and Dragon's expressionless face. But the problem is that would also bring consequences. If Luffy had been raised by Dragon from the start, the first and most painful consequence would be simple, silent, and irreversible. He would never have met Zoro. And that detail changes absolutely everything because Zoro wasn't just the first crewmate, he was the mirror, the one who held the emotional rudder of the crew in the worst moments, even without smiling, even without getting the jokes, even without asking. So imagine a Luffy who never reaches Shellstown, never finds that swordsman tied to a wooden cross, never gets to say, you want to be the greatest swordsman in the world? Then come with me. That just doesn't happen. Zoro remains alone. Maybe still imprisoned, maybe freed on his own, maybe dead from a random decision by Morgan. And the world never sees that green-haired guy swear never to lose again. Luffy, in this universe, grows up surrounded by revolutionaries. Not by someone who chose to follow him purely out of trust. Without Zoro, there's no moral leash. Because no matter how free Luffy is, Zoro was the one who imposed an invisible limit, a silent respect. He was the one who said when something crossed the line. Without him, Dragon's Luffy grows with a different kind of morality. More radical, closer to Sabo's, less pirate, more avenger. and that changes the entire course of the journey. Then comes Nami's absence. Because without passing through Shell's Town, without becoming a pirate in the traditional way, Luffy never steps into Orange Town. And if he doesn't step there, he never fights Buggy, never eats that horrible food at the floating restaurant, never has to punch a giant lion. And more than that, he never meets the cruise thief, the wounded cartographer, the girl who stole from pirates to save her village. Nami is never recruited. Arlong remains an isolated threat in East Blue. Maybe he continues enslaving Kokoyashi for years. Maybe he gets defeated by another pirate. Maybe the Revolutionary Army never even notices his existence. And Luffy, without her, never has that moment of real rage, of help me that Nami whispers, never hands her the hat, never feels the weight of fighting for someone who no longer believes in hope. Usopp also fades from this universe, because Syrup Village only becomes part of the story thanks to the classic route. The lying boy, son of Shanks' sniper, is left alone telling stories to himself. And maybe one day he takes a small boat and tries to follow his father. But he never meets Luffy, never hears that he's brave, never becomes Sniper King, never gets the chance to, through tears, say, I'm weak, but I'll fight anyway. And without Usopp, without his aim, without his soft heart, the crew that might have been born would never have that human element, that connection to fear and the desire to overcome it. Sanji? Forget it! The Baratie would never cross the path of a revolutionary. Maybe the Luffy raised by Dragon wouldn't even care about a restaurant in the middle of the sea. And even if he passed by without the same hungry heart, maybe he wouldn't bond with that cigarette-smoking cook, without Nami to convince him, without Zoro nearly dying, without Don Krieg to bring chaos. Maybe Luffy would never see Sanji kneel before Zeph, crying, saying he wanted to repay his debt. And Sanji, stuck at the Baratie, would never discover the path to the All Blue. He'd stay there, cooking for bad pirates, dreaming small, living in the almost. And Chopper? Drum Island would be just another page in the Revolutionary Army's records. A cold, sick, and isolated monarchy. Wapol would be just another name on the list of tyrants. And the little reindeer who once dreamed of pirates would probably stay on the mountain, looking after the other reindeer, alone, visiting Dr. Hirulik's grave, with no one to tell him that monsters can be accepted too. With no one to smile at him wearing a straw hat, Robin might still be rescued by the revolutionaries, but not in the same way. Without the straw hats, maybe she'd never find a group that treated her like a friend. Maybe she'd just become a tactical asset, used in espionage missions. Maybe she'd never see the beauty of having a place in the sun. Maybe she'd never say, I want to live. Frankie would remain in Water 7, without the crew as a push to build something beyond weapons, without building the Sunny, without being part of something greater. And Brook, trapped in the Florian Triangle, might hear his own laughter echo for decades, without meeting a single living soul, without singing Binks' sake to anyone. Without those meetings, Luffy's saga would have no color. It would have strength, no doubt. It would have impact, maybe even sooner, because Dragon would have prepared him for that. But it wouldn't have emotion. It would be a journey of purpose, not one of discovery. The Luffy raised by the army would know what justice is, but maybe he'd never understand the value of friendship in its purest form. In the end, Dragon's Luffy might still become a legend. He might even be the strongest man in the world, but he would never be the Pirate King. Because being Pirate King isn't just about being strong. It's about being free, with people by your side. It's about turning enemies into friends. It's about collecting promises made through tears, laughter, and meat. And without the Straw Hats, he would never have had that. He would have command. He would have respect. He would have the world at his feet. But maybe in the silence of the ship, he'd feel the absence of something he never lived, of a sleepy swordsman, of a fiery navigator, of a long-nosed liar, of a cook who complains about everything, of a doctor who cries easily, of an archaeologist who understands glances, of a shipwright who blows everything up, of a skeleton who sings alone, of a fish man helmsman who understands the sea like someone hearing music. Maybe he'd miss having a crew, even without knowing what that means. That was today's content. We hope you liked it and want to share your opinion on the subject. Don't forget to share the video, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and stay amazing.